Of course, of course, of course. All right. A little late, but here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Let me just switch this up. Uh, and we should be good. All right. All right. I appreciate y'all tuning in a little later than usual. That's funny. There we are. So, all right. I wasn't able to stream the last few days. Got into our car accident. I'm healthy. I'm good. We're all right. But just trying to figure all that out while making sure that I'm still able to get to work and whatnot. Commuting is always a hassle. Pero ya saben, we make it work. We manage. Um, I love public transportation. Unfortunately, it's just a little too unreliable. The distance that I have to travel. Plus, I'm always late to everything, so it makes it difficult. Uh, Both to rely on it and on myself. Um, so just trying to figure things out, get things handled with the insurance. I will share this. I have total two vehicles and walked off fine. Um, this last time though, I think the whiplash had me in a bit of a brain fog, just a bit. But I'm feeling better now. That's the reason why I didn't stream yesterday. I was jumping through some insurance hoops, but also I couldn't get my head right, and that was weird. That was unusual for me. But here we are, sano, healthy. We're all good. Um, Hopefully, I get the my vehicle up and running by next week because it's just been a headache trying to maneuver and juggle all those things. But hey, man, in the grand scheme of things, just very fortunate, very very fortunate. Um, so that's why, and I want to make sure that I stream today because I appreciate the support through yeah, super chats and super stickers, but more importantly through Patreon. Um, I do feel responsible to make sure that I put some stuff out in order to demonstrate that I'm not trying to take advantage of anyone or be an opportunist of anyone's generosity. So I appreciate y'all supporting through the Patreon. Literally, um, without that support, I don't know how I would have been able to manage this accident. Um, Without, yeah. So just thank you so much. Thank you all so much. I truly, truly appreciate it. Normally, I like to put all that in back into this. Um, for the setup for the stream and whatnot. But this time, it was, man, I feel very fortunate. So thank you all, truly, truly, for the help, and I feel fortunate for my health. So here we are. Um, Last time, I don't think I showed the video or the entirety of the public execution, the murder carried out by ICE of Renee Good. Um, and I don't think it'll be necessary either to show it here of um, sorry, Alex. I kept trying to say Parent, right? But I think I was just thinking about the passing of Michael Parenti, who, look, just like any other figure, is has their faults. But I think I speak for a lot of us when I say that, um, black shirts and reds was a quick, it's a quick read, uh, but it's also a great introduction into understanding the significance of what it means to be anti-fascist and the necessity to be you know an actual socialist, a communist, in order to combat fascism, and that if you are smearing socialist communists, um, then you're aiding and abetting fascism, because liberalism cannot defeat fascism. um, I know I think I'm the friendliest when it comes to anarchists, but I'm more than happy to be corrected. But I don't think anarchism can defeat fascism. I think it requires collective organized effort. Um, but I'm more than happy to be corrected on that. So Michael Parenti passed away. Again, critical of some of his positions, especially I'm always critical of anyone that does not view the primary contradiction here in the Belly of the Beast to be settler colonialism. I think that your analysis is going to be rooted, or the foundation of your analysis is going to be uh, established on something that's inaccurate. It has to be settler colonialism. And if you don't make it such, then you are normalizing colonization. It's as simple as that. Um, so, is the title of this? Is it what's? Look, I just set it up like pretty quick, but is it crazy? Uh, oh, I mean, the reason why I titled it that is because of this. Let me see if I don't have it things lined up the way I normally like to have them. So, spoiler alert. I think it's actually back here. So, Governor JP Pretzer says it's time to abolish Trump's ICE. So, I wanted to include that in the title because Democrats are going to be doing this moving forward. If they're not outright funding ICE, they're going to be trying to salvage the PR of ICE, meaning, hey, uh, oh, okay, yeah, the thumbnail, yeah. I mean, look, the same thing with Renee Good. I think it's a compliment to call white people race traders. Like you should be betraying whiteness and white supremacy. 100% absolutely, you should be putting your life on the line like that. Um, that's the minimum. I've said it for a long time. John Brown should be the basic standard for white allies. It's that simple. Um, it's that simple. I think it's unfortunate for a lot of white people, especially in the Wonder Bread space, that one of my closest friends growing up was a sharp. And whatever criticism there is of the larger sharp community and what it's become, this is somebody who was proactively checking me, who's white, I should add, and was checking me in my anti-blackness when I was like a young being that did not even, you know, really factor that into his worldview. There's somebody who I had to stop from fighting some giant neo-Nazi that we ran into uh, because we were so fucking high school kids that were gonna get this demolished by this fucking yoked out, probably straight out of La Pinta, a white supremacist. And the homie was a big boy, like fucking. I'm sure he's got that Viking ancestry that Cash Patel shares. But this one was even a bigger white boy, right? Like Brock Lesnar said, a sharp is a skinhead against racial prejudice. Um, but yeah, check out the movie. This is England if you haven't seen it. It's a great flick. Uh, some a very brutal scene, but it's right there alongside American History X of like, hey, like white people and the bullshit. But this is why it's so important to highlight and appreciate those individuals that are putting their life on the line. And I'm not here to worship or glorify or put um, Alex. And again, my apologies. I keep wanting to say uh, Parenti, but that's not what it is. It's Pretti, 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 Alex Pretti. Man, it doesn't get more, evident. It doesn't get more evident of a public execution than this. It really doesn't. They chase him down. I mean, he was literally trying to protect a woman, and from being pepper sprayed in the face and attacked by ICE, and he gets swarmed. He gets swarmed by like 5, 6, 7 ICE agents. He's getting pistol whipped on the sidewalk, and he was armed, uh, which is his right. It's his right to be armed, and he's getting pistol whipped. He's getting pepper sprayed in the face, and still, after removing his weapon, they unload on him while his body is already laying dead flat on the ground. They continue shooting him. That's a public execution through and through. And the reason why I highlight the race raider aspect of it is, man, let me pull it up. Let me pull up the version that is from a distance. I think it might be the one that I first saw. Um, and it's weird that they wouldn't. Oh, people are spelling his name wrong. Okay, let's see. And here's the difficult question too: is this difficult aspect of it all. I'm just making sure there's nothing too unhinged in the search. And it's something that we have to always remain critical of, are these veterans. And he was I believe he was a nurse, yeah, at the VA. uh, this whole idea of the imperial boomerang and colonialism turned inward, understand that this is exclusively applied or meant to focus on white people having to deal with this. Black and brown people, indigenous people have been dealing with this since the inception of the settler colonial project. So this idea of an imperial boomerang is highlighting that white people are now facing the consequences of what they've benefited from for decades, for centuries. Um, so whenever I see somebody mention imperial boomerang, and now it's become such a cliche among rad libs to talk about imperialism turned inward. Um, to me, it really does bother me. It kind of doesn't anger me, but it does annoy me because it highlights that um, you're making it unique or special when it affects you. But when it's been tearing our communities apart, our families apart, um, it wasn't fascism then. It wasn't the imperial boomerang then. But when it affects you, now suddenly it's something unique. And it may seem petty of me to be annoyed by that, frustrated by that. But again, everything's centered around whiteness. Everything's centered around whiteness. There's a reason why this is such a unique, moment with the assassination, execution, murder of Rene Good. Now the execution, the assassination, the murder of Alex. Uh, I want to make sure I'm being respectful. Alex Pretti, is that they're white individuals, a white woman. Now she was queer. I'm not sure specifically in what sense. I know she had a husband and children, and then had a wife. Um, but she was queer, so that kind of disrupts, excuse me, like the perfect victim angle of the pure white woman that so often gets weaponized in order to excuse uh, white supremacist atrocities being committed against black and indigenous men, brown men as well. So almost a perfect victim, but not quite. And it's the reason why I'm like, look, we have to highlight that we're not in pursuit of perfect victims. If Muhammad Al Kurd taught us anything with just a fascinating, he's a poet through and through, and some of those lines in Perfect Victims is the way that he writes them are so painfully beautiful and gut wrenching and so accurate in a way that only a poet can truly um, illustrate or you know write down, communicate what I can. So The whiteness aspect is a big factor in this, and the idea that um, Alex Pretti was armed is also a big aspect of it. Although there's an argument of whether or not he had like two weapons. I've seen some reactionaries push that, but for sure, the weapon he did have on him, ICE agents removed from him. That is confirmed before they assassinated him. So with that in mind, he was armed. He did not point his weapon at the ICE agents. Um, one of my criticisms, and we'll read the piece by TooBlack um, about these nonviolent movements, is you're setting yourself up again. Kwame Ture told us about the lack of consciousness with the American empire. It's non-existent. So this nonviolent stuff does not work. It will get you killed. And I do think there's a unique targeting of these race traders, of white individuals who refuse to normalize this white nationalist project that sees, a lot of the economic aspect of it, sees what's about to happen, that there's going to be a crash. And whenever there is that economic crash, you see the higher sense of xenophobia, that fervor, that anti-immigrant fervor get increased. We saw it with uh, Operation Wetbag, and we have criticism for the Mexican government involvement in that. But at the end of the day, if we're prioritizing the lives of American citizens, it was still brown American citizens that were indiscriminately deported for simply being brown, right? So it was a racial thing. It was not strictly a nationalist thing. So white supremacy is rooted in this project and the actions that it takes. So when you have individuals like Rene Good, when you have individuals like Alex Pretti, in their ways, despite me being critical of nonviolent movements, we're not organized to do anything greater than that without being prepared for the blowback, without being prepared, excuse me, not without being prepared, while being unprepared for the blowback and the consequences of the state finally getting the opportunity to really flex itself. That's why you don't hear me calling for adventurism. That's why you don't hear me calling for this and that, and getting busy and starting this, action and whatnot, because we're not organized. We're not organized in a way to be prepared to protect our communities at large. The elderly, men, women, right? Children, those who are unwilling to engage in direct action, we're not prepared to protect our communities from the blowback, from the consequences of combating the white supremacist Christian nationalist state. So you don't hear me calling for that. I'm not like Noah Samson calling for that shit, and then like a dog hiding its tail between his legs, going back and then removing that from his video. You don't hear me calling for that because I'm quite aware of the consequences to the most marginalized communities when things get active like that. We don't have the communal infrastructure. We're not organized and prepared to protect and defend our communities, because it's not just about arming up. It's about having safe drinking water. It's about having food. It's about having these resources. It's about having safety, areas. It's a whole lot more. And when they're kidnapping our children, and they've been kidnapping our children, I was having difficulty, grappling about covering that young child that was left to the state. Um, I'm not here to bring my fucking daddy issues on you foos. You know what I mean? So I had to like make sure I balance that shit out and give the best analysis that I can while being honest. But I couldn't help but to be critical of that situation because I don't want kids because I'm too selfish. But if you're gonna run, if you're gonna invade, you vas a dejar tu hijo. I don't know how to talk about that without you know, getting angry, getting emotional because I see that little kid and I see, yeah, ah, and knowing the abuse, the child trafficking, the missing children that this settler colonial project has always participated in. Epstein isn't something unique. Colonizers, Europeans have always engaged in the trafficking of children since day one. When we get to the chapters on Columbus and how that sex trade started since then and before then, they've always been superb masters at operating sex trafficking rings. And we know that these children are being sexually assaulted in these ICE concentration camps under Obama, under Biden, under Trump. So se pone difícil. It gets a little difficult to talk about that without losing my composure. And as much as I want to be sympathetic and understanding because I have the privilege, the benefit of being a citizen, I don't know what that father was thinking. I don't know what that father was thinking. I don't. What I do know is that he ran, from my understanding, that he ran without his kid. And it makes it difficult for me to talk about it without sounding like I'm putting the blame on him. Because the blame is on ICE, 100%, 100%, no argument there. But I'm only human and I try my best to be honest about my biases, my blind spots, um, maybe my unfair judgment of others. I'm not a father, nor do I want to be one, but I can't help but to be critical and pass judgment on that man, on that individual. And I feel guilty for doing so because the focus should be on ICE. The focus should be on ICE. Pues está difícil. Está difícil. I just want to be blunt and honest about that aspect and that maybe some of you felt the same way. Maybe some of you try to ignore those thoughts. Maybe I'm the only asshole in the room, literally right now. So, but I thought I'd just be honest with that. But one thing that I wanted to point out is look, man, like this aspect here, like when I first saw this video, and this is why this whole fat jacketing thing is counterproductive. And he's got the look, over here. I was confused for a second when they squared up with him. I was biased. My anti-whiteness was showing, but he was being a good individual, good person here, trying to protect those around him, and he lost his life for it. Yeah, no, and I'm seeing like different perspectives and different reads on it. That's why I was like just saying in general, I was hesitant to talk about it because from what I initially read, there was that subconscious bias and judgment. And I'm not here to bullshit and pretend that I'm something that I'm not. And so if I'm gonna tell you what my initial reactions were. So, but then when we have situations, and the reason why, and I kind of got a little lost there. I'm not gonna lie. Um, he was armed. Keith Porter was also armed, and I talked about because there's a distinction, right? Keith Porter allegedly had his weapon out. Allegedly was celebrating New Year's, was firing his weapon, and an off-duty ICE agent confronted him and then murdered him. And I talked about the necessity to avoid needing perfect victims. But it is I don't even want to call it amusing or funny or ironic or anything or make light of it. So I'm not sure how to word it, but there's something among like the larger white community that even when they're presented with the very perfect victims that they want, that they call for, they still do not give a fuck. They're still willing to sacrifice them for the larger white supremacist project. They are simply fodder. And we have to understand this is why settler colonialism has to be the primary contradiction and the main focus. Because although whiteness grants you, status, privileges, and whatnot, priority in the settler colonial project, you are just mass to it to take up space, to maintain a numerical majority. So if you don't play along, if you're not aiding and abetting the white supremacist project, agenda, mission, and you get in its way, you will be removed. You will be used as fodder and used as an example for anybody daring to become a race trader. And the reason why I went out of my way to make sure that in the thumbnail it says race trader, we cannot minimize the white supremacist aspect of this all. We cannot minimize that aspect. That is what the project is attempting to do and implement right now. Supercharge it because it's always present. It's always present. But to make it this blatant is what is unsettling to some, to some white sympathetic individuals. So you have an almost perfect victim in Renee Good. She's queer. So you see how a lot of these reactionaries immediately cling on to that and promote that and push that. And I can't stand Kyle KKK Kalinske, but he was on Piers Morgan, and I forget who the reactionary ghoul that he was debating. The very same one that called for the extermination of trans individuals. Shoot, he's one of the Daily Wire guys. I want to say Michael Knoll, I believe. So Michael Knoll was hammering the fact that Renee Good had a wife, that she was a lesbian, that she was queer, hammering that aspect of it. And Kyle KKK Kalinske, highlighted how that's irrelevant to anything. And because of that, yes, thank you so much. It was Michael Knowles, disgusting individual. Like I'm saying, they latched onto that because, like, oh, it's a white woman. Oh, they're like, thank God, she was a sinner. Thank goodness. Our base is going to support that through and through. Our base is going to cling on to that because they cannot be sympathetic to somebody that goes against our holy scripture all of a sudden. Now they could forgive the creepy uncle that like gets a little too touchy. They could forgive when somebody smacks around their wife. They can forgive all these individuals, but if you're gay, they'll disown you. You see the rates of homelessness, right? Let's not pretend that this progress that we're pushed, that we're spoon fed into believing that we just invest more into the system that will be rewarded with rights and our humanity being acknowledged. There's still very large sections of the country where that does not fly. And so, not a perfect victim. Now you have you're a veteran who's a nurse at the VA. And how many times don't we hear reactionaries say, "Oh, well, we can't do that, or we can't afford this, we can't." What about the troops? What about all the homeless troops? What about the VA? Why aren't we doing that? Oh, that's where the money should go, and the money never goes there. The money never goes there. And don't get me wrong, I'm not over here saying, hey, these war criminals should be taken care of. Hey, these war criminals should be glorified. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that their excuse is completely a lie. It's a complete lie. But even when the situation happens, Second Amendment right. He didn't pull the gun on them. He didn't try shooting at them. It was simply caring. It's God-given American right. That's still not perfect enough. That's still not perfect enough. And it never will be. It never will be. It never will be perfect enough. I've been seeing contradicting things whether or not he was a veteran. So but he definitely worked at the VA hospital. But that's not what I was looking for. Let me do that real quick. Oh, there's another angle here. Let me turn this down.
Go.
It was helping out, just guiding traffic here.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
And immediately start pepper spraying, pushes the woman down. He's literally getting in the way, physically putting his body in the line between this woman being assaulted by an ICE agent and the ICE agent. And being maced in the face for doing so. Trying to help her up. They're dragging them both.
People, the fuck is wrong with you?
I'm afraid of like
Honestly.
talking to people who are outside of my race.
And they unload, like completely on them. Look how many, dude, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 7 of this was also an ICE agent over here. Yeah. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe 6 on this side. 6 ICE agents for one individual, unload on him. There's another angle of an ICE agent clapping in celebration, if you haven't seen it. Let me find that real quick. Oh yeah, here it is. Let me see here. It's this one right here. Watch. So again, you know, just I'm trying not to show it, but the gunshots are there. And I know even that can be a lot for individuals. Literally being like, let's go. Let's get it. Hyped up. They want this. This is what they signed up for. This is what the state hired them for. So this idea that Democrats are pushing, liberals are pushing, we need reform, we need better training, we need better hiring practices, all this bullshit. And this is who they fundamentally want. We need to stop seeing ICE as something distinct from any other pig. They're meant to hurt us. They're meant to oppress us. They're meant to keep us in line. But because the Republicans are more braggadocious, more bombastic, more daring, shameless, it gives Democrats the space and room to say, hey, we could do it better. Hey, we could do it better. We could be more humane in our oppression. Don't worry, we'll have proper investigations when our dogs bite. We won't let them off the leash completely. We'll train them well. That's literally all the Democratic Party is offering. That's all the Democratic Party is offering. And that's why they focus on Trump's ICE. Because when it becomes Newsom's ICE, it'll be different. Because they're not going to abolish it. Or if they do, it's like that creep Destiny said. They're just going to give the responsibility to an already existing police agency whose atrocities, whose violence we can normalize and have accepted as the way of life. Or they're going to create a new agency, preferably under a Democratic administration, so that we know that all the proper training and hiring practices are followed, so that maybe ICE or whatever it becomes can reflect a normal type of violence that we're used to from seeing from the average pig. Maybe that would be more malleable, more acceptable, easier for the masses to swallow and appreciate. Maybe that. Yeah. This guy right here. Mind you, doesn't even know what's happening. We got another one. Look at it. Mind you, Jonathan Ross had been in ICE. It wasn't like he was hired by the Trump administration. Jonathan Ross had been in ICE. Jonathan Ross was a veteran. So let's not jump into conclusions to assume that this individual here clapping and celebrating is Trump's ICE. As if making that distinction, and I've seen it, I've argued with liberals online about this. All of the individuals hired before Trump came in are different. They're probably there for good fucking reasons. The delusion is unreal. So again,
well, the American public has lost trust in ICE and CBP because of the constant lies.
Lost trust. The American public lost trust. Sure, the larger white population probably did trust ICE and Border Patrol. We never did. We never trusted them. We knew that they were after our families. We knew that they were trying to separate us.
I'm afraid of like talking to people who are outside of my race.
Greg Bovino, Tricia McLaughlin, Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, they come out and say things that we have now proven are false. They accuse people of things, as they did in Chicago, and try to take them to court and criminalize something that they did when it turns out they didn't do it. And indeed, none of those charges have stuck. They've all been dismissed across the board. So trust is lost, and it's why Trump's ICE has to go.
In order to regain the public's trust in ICE. So what needs to happen? What do the Democratic Party, what do they need to do to regain the public's trust in ICE? You see, that's their mentality. What can we do to rebrand this institution? Not abolish it, not defund it. How do we rebrand it? How do we sell it again to the people? Maybe not to love them, but to accept them, normalize them, and not call for their abolishment. Sweeter Than Anything says ICE endorsed Trump before he even had been president the first time. That may be so. It didn't stop Joe Biden from promising to give Border Patrol and ICE everything they wanted, to the point that Lindsey Graham was worshiping that bill, that proposal. That was only stopped because of Donald Trump's political ambition.
We've got to figure out how what we're going to do to replace it with something responsible and with responsible people. Well, the American public has lost trust in ICE and CBP because of the constant lies.
So that last part is what I want y'all to focus in.
Trust is lost, and it's why Trump's ICE has to go. We've got to figure out how what we're going to do to replace it with something responsible and with responsible people.
With something responsible, with responsible people. Again, Jonathan Ross was apparently responsible. He was apparently a responsible individual. That didn't stop him from executing Renee Good. Let's listen to Kristi Noem over here.
An individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently. Fearing for his life and for the lives of his fellow officers around him, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics were on the scene immediately and attempted to deliver medical aid to the subject, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines with ammunition in them that held dozens of rounds. He also had no ID. This looks like a situation where an individual arrived at this scene to inflict maximum damage on individuals and to kill law enforcement. An individual approached U.S. Border Patrol.
So we'll break that down. An individual approached U.S. Border Patrol. No, he did not. He went to go help and aid the woman that was assaulted by ICE, Border Patrol, the pigs. Let's stop making these fucking distinctions that liberals are trying to capitalize off of.
Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun.
Did not approach him with that. That was literally on his person. To say I approach somebody with a weapon usually implies that I have it in hand. He had it holstered and secured, and it wasn't even visible until he was put on the ground. And by that point, he had already been physically assaulted and pepper sprayed and getting pistol whipped.
9mm semi-automatic handgun approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently.
No, he was reacting to being pepper sprayed multiple times in the face, being pistol whipped, and I'm sure taking other hits that weren't visible to us or noticeable. He was reacting like any human being would when he's getting stomped out by like 7-6 thugs.
Fearing for his life and for the lives of his fellow officers around him, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics were on the scene immediately.
Defensive shots. One of them unloaded his weapon while he was still literally laying still on the floor, on the sidewalk. His body was only moving at that point as a reaction, as a response to the impact of the bullets.
And attempted to deliver medical aid to the subject, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines with ammunition in them that held dozens of rounds.
What does that have to do with the fact that he was murdered? Okay, is that illegal? Is that his right? You see, always the contradictions of who's allowed to be a true patriotic American and have their Second Amendment right. Literally, the whole spiel was about what? The Second Amendment exists for what? To stop tyranny, to stop a tyrannical government. Seems pretty appropriate. But he wasn't even doing that. Because the reality is the Second Amendment is there for when indigenous people got too rowdy, for when Africans resisted enslavement. That's what the Second Amendment is for. It's not to stop a tyrannical government. What happened every time that these settlers got upset at the tyranny of their government? They got stomped the fuck out. Every single time. Every single time that colonizers felt that their right to be the savage, invasive species that they are, the state came and checked them and reminded them the rules and guidelines of the project. The Second Amendment is not there to stop a tyrannical government. The Second Amendment is there so that the settler, the colonizer, the frontiersman could stomp out, can execute, can exterminate the indigenous population, or to defend themselves against the crazed Black individuals that dared to want freedom, that didn't know their place. That's what the Second Amendment is truly there for. And you see the reality of this. You see the reality here. You see that reality, that undeniable reality. That we are fed these lies and illusions of what America is. Liberals, rad lips, democratic socialists still want to uphold that shit. Because they're afraid of confronting the reality and truth. Because again, they all want to defend the status quo. They're upset that the status quo is being unsettled with this. Publicly executing Renee Good, publicly executing, jeez, I'm butchering his name nonstop. Pretti. Is it Alex Pretti? Publicly executing him. That's not the status quo. You can't be murdering those type of white people. Maybe the rednecks, maybe the trailer trash. Yeah, we'll ignore that. But not these type of white people. So it makes the liberals whose entire existence is based on maintaining the status quo too uncomfortable. Look at the reaction and the response to the kidnapping and murder of brown and Black people being kidnapped by ICE, to the execution of Renee Good. The white people are telling us, the country's telling us what is too much and what is too far. And again, this isn't to smear or to downplay or to excuse in any way the sacrifice, the willingness to put their lives on the line that Renee Good and Pretti were willing to do. I'm talking about the reaction of, all right, too much is too much. Because you're disturbing the status quo. And even in the response to this, liberals want you to maintain the status quo by being peaceful, by behaving. They call for it time and time again while they lie in your fucking face. While these fascists, while the first American fascists, the first time, well, second time, because it happened during Trump the first time, but then it took a hiatus, 4-year hiatus, and then it's back now. So for the second time in American history that we see fascism, it has to be resist, but in a peaceful manner. And you know, if we just believe enough in the American institutions, the National Guard, and the pigs, your local pigs, don't worry, you're not the federal pigs, those are scary foreign pigs. Those are out-of-state pigs. But your local pig will protect you, will defend you, will fight fascism on your behalf. Because it's not ACAB anymore, apparently. It's not all cops are bastards now. Some cops are your saviors. Some cops are your saviors. And whenever they create another institution, because ICE, fairly young institution, whenever they create another one, don't worry. By then, ICE will be reformed enough to be your new savior. Suddenly, they'll be the good guys. I wonder what mascot they're going to give ICE. Can y'all hear that? Let me see if I can put it up a little bit, but I don't want it getting too loud. Let me test run this. Hold on. Yeah, that would have been mad loud. Give me 1 second here. Let's try that again.
Ernesto, within your time, have you activated the National Guard? I noted that Sheriff Witt has requested for additional assistance. Can you tell us whether they're going to be playing a role in keeping?
Yeah.
So the question is, have you activated the National Guard? Mind you, he activated the National Guard during the Black Lives Matter uprisings. Donald Trump praised Tim Walz for it. And all the rad libs, all the liberals praised Tim Walz when he was announced as the vice presidential candidate for the Kamala Harris campaign.
Yes, the answer is yes, we have, as we said last week, and we staged those troops. I'll have General Menke talk about where they're at, and again, use this as an opportunity to stress to Minnesotans the frustration you have, and as you saw this, they killed a man, created chaos, pushed down protesters, threw gas indiscriminately, and then left the scene, and then we're left to clean up. I understand the anger. I understand trying to parse who were the law enforcement on the scene when you got there after a man was killed is difficult for the folks who are out there, but I can't stress.
But, you notice how he answers, yeah, no, we got the National Guard. And he immediately directs his attention to the citizens of Minnesota. Immediately starts warning them about the deployment of the National Guard. Just start talking about, hey, ICE, watch out. Hey, ICE, I have deployed the National Guard. So, yada, yada, whatever bullshit. No. Immediately, yes, I deployed the National Guard. So, Minnesotans, you better fucking behave yourself. So who is he deploying the National Guard for? Who is he deploying the National Guard against? Who is the VP that all the rad libs, Sam Cedar, Hassan Piker, Emma Vigeland, I'm sure TYT, the Vanguard, Kyle KK Kalinske, Crystal Ball. Who is Tim Walz? The VP that should have been. The chunky jolly Bernie Sanders. Who is Tim Walz deploying the National Guard against? Because right now he's warning the citizens of Minneapolis. That's who he's warning. He's not warning ICE. That's weird because I was told by these rat libs that the National Guard was going to protect them from ICE. That their local pigs were going to defend them from ICE. Doesn't sound like it.
That's enough. Our goal, and I'll have General Minke talk about what the role of these Guard troops are in conjunction with incredible work from the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, from mutual aid across, and of course the State Patrol, of trying to get to the point where what we're saying is we can handle this and Minnesotans can express their First Amendment rights and have our folks on the streets and get these people out of here. And so, John, if you want to talk a little bit, but the answer is yes, there's activated. He can talk to you about numbers.
To be clear, that they're activated different than having them staged.
Yeah.
So the question is, what's the National Guard doing right now? So we have, we have been on state active duty for over a week. So we've had soldiers prepared in the metro area to respond in a much rapid manner than if they were not mobilized. So we have a request from the Hennepin County Sheriff to support them, and that is to help them free up additional resources for other work that they need to do. And we have started coordinating with them this morning on that, and that first area of support will be assisting them with their requirement to provide security to the Whipple building. So we'll be helping them there. And then we are in parallel planning with other organizations within the state of Minnesota, to include the State Patrol, the Minnesota DNR, and other local agencies to render assistance if requested.
Don't worry, the police state is going to save us from the police state. That's what's being advertised. The solution to the federal state is the national state. Our dogs are better trained and more civilized than their dogs. But if you step out of line, we're going to sick them on you either way. Here's all this fucking shit, bro.
So, to President Trump, this is a moment to act like a leader.
Bro, I just feel like they're just having a good time. Like, this is like a skit, and they're like, don't break, please, don't laugh. And then they get on the phone later on, they're just fucking dying laughing. Let me see how loud this is going to be first. It was pretty loud at first. Yeah, it's going to be pretty loud. Let me tune it down here.
So, to President Trump, this is a moment to act like a leader. Put Minneapolis, put America first in this moment. Let's achieve peace. Let's end this operation, and I'm telling you, our city will come back. Safety will be restored.
Whoa.
We're asking for you to take action now to remove these federal agents. Director Sayer. So,
motherfucker literally came out here and said, don't worry, Mr. Donald Trump president, sir. Play nice and we'll restore law and order. Don't you worry about that. We'll restore law and order. Don't worry about that. We promise. We know how to make these people behave. Again, refuse to do anything substantial. The local police, they're in BLM. And now it's the scary federal police. Now it's the scary federal pigs. Fucking new villain of the week. And look, the reason why I found this hilarious too is Nina Turner. Oh man, that's somebody that can yap from the sidelines. You know, the reason why I rather have these individuals elected like Mamdani isn't because I support them or believe in them. It's because I like to point at them to be like, see, even your favorites, even the ones you wanted to win, are insufficient to say the least. are usually compradors, are usually there to mislead us, are usually there to normalize the next great atrocity or despicable action taken against us. And Obama being a prime example of it. So, just like how Bernie Sanders is out here praising Donald Trump when it comes to immigration, Nina Turner's family is connected to the pigs. So don't believe don't believe she's going to do anything to actually hold them accountable when that's her family. Don't believe the hype. But I like to see the hype. That way there's no excuses. That way the illusion is burst. But because she's on the sideline, she can still pretend to be for us. And I do appreciate this. I sincerely do. 75 Democrats who voted to express gratitude to ICE in 2025. 75. 75. So when they show us, let's see here, the 7. Where is this? They even have it lined up. When they show us it, it's too funny. Here we go. When they show us this, it's like, oh, it's just 7 of them. Democrats who voted for DHS funding bill amid ICE enforcement controversy. January 22nd, 2026, these House Democrats joined with Republicans to approve Department of Homeland Security funding legislation during ongoing debate over immigration enforcement tactics. Look at this. Maria Gulinskap Perez. I believe she married into the Perez last name, but nonetheless. But don't worry, it's just these 7. It's just these 7. It's just these 7. So if we keep voting for Democrats, if we keep supporting the Democratic Party, if we get enough AOCs, if we get enough Mamdanis, if we get enough Bernies, enough Rashida Tlaibs, enough Ilhan Omar, we won't have this issue. We just have to vote harder for the Democratic Party. So 7 of these individuals just happen to just line up perfectly. And they want you to focus, oh, it's just these 7, it's just these 7, it's just these 7. 2025, 75 Democrats who voted to express gratitude to ICE. So is it 7 or 75? Is it 7 or 75? Keep voting for the Democratic Party. They're going to save us from ICE. Don't worry about it. Well, when they're not worshiping or voting to fund them. It is just astonishing. Richie Torres, who was recently trying to profit off the death of Renee Good. Right here, Richie Torres, New York 15. One of the 75 Democrats who voted to express gratitude to ICE in 2025. It's just completely unsurprising. But don't worry, the Democratic Party is going to save us from these fascists. Yeah, no, these 7 were just the ones called up. I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of these individuals, their seats are fairly secured for the time being. Or they hope that by the time they have an election, enough has occurred to where this can't be used against them. That is the hope. But I don't know. This one looks a little Compador. That's 2 L's right there. But I don't recognize the last name. Oh, my bad. Vicente Gonzalez de Texas. Gotta love the Compadors. Gotta love the Compadors. I mean, you're a Democrat in Texas. Jesus. Man. So remember, it's not the 7, it's 75 at least. It just reminds me when Booker was out here being like, yes, we're going to fund the police more. And I never want to hear Republicans say that we don't love the police. Like, all right, bro, congrats. Thank you for making it clear for the rest of us. It's a little bit more here. I believe it's from the same.
I'm done being told that our community members are responsible for the vitriol in our streets. I'm done being told that our local elected officials are solely responsible for turning down the temperature. So to everyone listening, stand with Minneapolis. Stand up for America. Recognize that your children will ask you what side you were on. Your grandchildren will ask you what you did to act to prevent this from happening again, to make sure that the foundational elements of our democracy were rock solid. What did you do to protect your city? What did you do to protect your nation? This is not what America is about. This is not a partisan issue. This is an American issue. This administration and everyone involved in this operation should be reflecting. They should be reflecting right now and asking themselves, what exactly are you accomplishing? If the goal was to achieve peace and safety, this is doing exactly the opposite. If the goal was to achieve and prosperity, this is doing exactly the opposite. Are you standing up for American families right now, or are we tearing them apart? The invasion of these heavily armed masked agents roaming around on our streets of Minneapolis, emboldened with a sense of impunity, it has to end. This is not how it has to be. So, to President Trump, this is a moment to act.
And that's the first half of the shorter clip that we watched. And again, it's not exactly the Obama approach, but you definitely, you see the he doesn't do the long vocal fry, long pauses, but it's there. It's there. It's a little, it annoys me. It's so condescending. This whole idea of the American dream, the American myth, the illusion of America and what it can be and what it should be. It's no different than hearing a Zionist say, oh, this isn't what Israel can be. This isn't the promise of Israel. And you hear Gabor Mate spew that. You hear those hypercritical liberal Zionists spew that.
I voted for Kamala Harris. You got a problem?
Thank you for your super chat. And Walker 2026 is crazy. Rest in peace, Parenti. Rest in peace, Pretti. Stay safe. Thank you so much for the super chat. Super chat and super stickers are turned on, y'all. If you want to join the Patreon, get access to the Discord. We miss, the book club because of essentially my car accident, me trying to navigate all that. But we're currently reading Open Veins in Latin America. That's open to everyone. But if you want to be part of the conversation and the debriefing of the chapters and the sections we're reading, we do that on the Discord. And for only $2, you get access to it. I appreciate all the support. I sincerely mean that I do not know how I would have gone through or made it through this incident as I'm working my way through it without the support that y'all have given. Truly, truly, really appreciate that. Do me a favor, go ahead and hit the like button. I usually don't stream this late or on Saturdays. I normally stream Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. So hit the notification bell if you want to know when I go live. Get más. Get busy in the chat. Don't be scared, homies. If you can't read the room, I'm not going to hold your hand through it. I'm not going to spoon feed anyone. Hit rewind if you want context to the thumbnail and to the title. I don't know you anything. But it is funny to see the spamming. But hey, small minds. Yeah. Commie Space Invader. Gabor Mate is a liberal Zionist, yes. He normalizes the Nakba. He believes that the Zionist entity has a right to exist and the land that it stole during the Nakba is somehow legitimately theirs. There's a reason why we don't mess around with bad Hasbro over here. That is liberal Zionist propaganda. They are the vanguard of liberal Zionist propaganda, led by Peter Beinart, Sam Cedar, Jon Stewart, those type of individuals. Yep, keep crying. Don't bother rewinding and learning context. Now, am I going to be petty? Yes, and here's why. Here's why I remain petty. Here's why I need to be petty. Here's why I hate these counterinsurgent propagandists like Hassan Piker, like Sam Cedar, like Kyle KKK Kalinske, like Crystal Ball, like Emma Vigeland, like Cenk Uygur, like Anna Kasparian, like the Vanguard, like the leftist mafia. Because they'll show up and do this. They'll dress with the aesthetic. They still look like fucking like the true feds that they are. And you could call Hassan Piker a fed now, as we found out that he worked for Homeland Security through Cicada, bragged about it. But this is why it's hilarious. Let me find it here. It's this one. This fool. Local LEOs backed by National Guard have to start arresting these ICE agents for breaking the law and killing Minnesotans. If people lose confidence in their local administrators and law enforcement, the social fabric holding by strings will rip and anarchy will ensue. Like when I read this, I assumed it was a joke, that it was tongue in cheek. Tongue in cheek. I really did. Because first of all, I mean, we've seen this before. Well, he'll smear anarchy like a liberal does, right? We can be critical of anarchy, which I have been and I am, but I don't smear anarchists. I don't see any point of it. And I don't think it's productive. I have more in common with an anarchist, even if they don't fuck with, my positions, than I do with Hassan Piker and any Radlib or Damn Sock or whatever the rebrand is, progressive, whatever they're calling themselves this week. But to call for the National Guard, and what does LEO stand for here? Law enforcement officers? That's fuck, bro. But if I were to say, hey, I think this is at the least critical position, control opposition, limited hangout. But he literally worked for Homeland Security through Cicada. Is this Hassan Piker, who was saying ACAB when it was popular, and apparently he can't bring up the fact that he called the pigs on his ex-girlfriend. Apparently, you can't bring that up. Mind you, she was a sex worker who had cut him off. Her friends let him know, hey, she's fine. There's no need to do a wellness check. There's no need to call the cops. Still did it. My criticism of sex work has always been directed at Johns. I want to be very clear about that. They're creeps, they're controlling, they're abusive, and that abuse and violence is demonstrated in different ways. Weaponizing the police. It's a little bougie. It's a little bit smoother, easier to deny, but nonetheless, you're putting a sex worker at risk at being murdered by the state, being abused by those pigs. And he did it just because he wasn't getting his calls returned, his text message answered. Seems a little controlling and abusive to me, but you can't bring that shit up. I only bring it up to address the contradictions of saying ACAB unless my ex-girlfriend is ignoring me. She must need a wellness check if she's ignoring Hassan Piker. So don't believe the ACAB bullshit, but this highlights it present day. Local law enforcement backed by the National Guard, the same National Guard that was stomping people out during the Black Lives Matter uprisings. The same local law enforcement that were normalized and expected to be used to killing us in the streets. Those are suddenly the good guys. Suddenly it's not ACAB anymore. He's worried about the people of Minnesota losing confidence, trust. Peltzer, what's his name? Peltzer was just talking about that, right? Peltzer was just talking about that. That we have to regain the trust of the community. So you see when they start, that's parallel language, the same language being used. That's when like flags should start being raised, alarms should be sound. Calling for the pigs to arrest federal agents is such a liberal fantasy that it would be comical if it wasn't aiding and abetting the illusion. Pritzker, thank you so much. That they so desperately want to maintain because they need the status quo. Because fundamentally he's a liberal, and when we read The Pitfalls of Liberalism by Kwame Ture, it highlights these type of individuals. It highlights these type of individuals. And there's a reason why, and I understand that me and certain individuals are never going to see eye to eye to this. But until we view liberals and these counterinsurgent propagandists as the enemies of the working class, as the enemies of the colonized proletariat, we will always be at risk of them capturing certain segments of the community and misleading them. This is not a cap. This is the glorification of local law enforcement. This is a glorification of the National Guard, because now the new boogeyman is ICE. So again, in a decade when there's a new agency, Hassan Parker is going to be tweeting out, local law enforcement, the National Guard, and ICE have to protect us from the new boogeyman. It is fundamentally is glorifying local law enforcement and the National Guard. That's what it's doing. The same people that have been smashing your heads, have been tear gassing you before I showed up to the streets. Those same individuals are suddenly your fucking heroes. Are suddenly the people that you need to maintain the fabric of society, or else it's going to be anarchy. If he stands up, then they stand up, then I might stand up, then it'll be anarchy. And I'm so glad that he got checked. And look, I'm not here for fed jacketing, but there's somebody who bragged about working for Homeland Security through Cicada. There's somebody who brags about working with the DNC. There's somebody who brags about voting for Holocaust Harris in California. There's somebody who says, oh, Zionists of any degree should be treated like neo-Nazis, but went into business with Ethan Klein, wore that disgusting IOF fresh merchandise from the IOF veteran, was giving gifts to Bernie Sanders and hoping that he'd come over to his place. Bernie Sanders, who had a alleged love affair with Golda Meir, at least it sounds like that by the way that he speaks about her. Golda Meir, who used chemical weapons against Palestinians in the West Bank, to say the least. So I'm so glad he got checked here. Oh, no, before he got checked, the illusion of what America is that they're pushing.
Just like-minded people, kind people, people that took the time out of their day, take a day off, call out of work to go take it to the streets. Can't beat it. These are some of the best people, some real Americans, not the fake-ass Americans that sit in their quiet rural towns, fantasizing about dominating people that are more vulnerable than they are. These are strong Americans, strong-minded.
Oh, man. LEOs is I assume that it was just, law enforcement officers, But this, again, it sounds like the ACP, like the American Communist Party. I mean, he even has the aesthetics, right? This could be Haas over here. No, these are real Americans. No wonder this fool and all these other rattlers were crying when somebody showed up to burn the American flag. I don't give a fuck if that was a Fed or not. Burning the American flag should not be something that Feds can weaponize, because that shit should be normalized when we're talking about these types of, unfortunately, movements and not, organized action. Oh yeah, he's among the poorest. He's among the peasants. These aren't the multimillionaires that he's used to hanging out with. And in fact, there's some colored people here, so he only really associates with whites. Look who he goes into business with.
Strong-minded, community-oriented. A lot of right-wingers will talk about high-trust societies, right? A sense of community. This is a real sense of community. People trusting one another, people protecting one another, people protecting their neighbors. Just like-minded people, kind.
So again, the glorification of what it is to be an American and the American dream and the American illusion is something that we have to burst. But hey, Americans behave when they protest. Americans act civilized when they protest. Americans know where the line is. They can't be acting like savages. This actually wasn't the thing that had made me chuckle. But the narrative of America is whenever it's pushed and glorified of what it is to be an American, we have to question it, because just the same way that we ask white people to abandon whiteness, we have to abandon the American illusion, the American dream. It's no different. It's no different than saying these are real Israelis. Not those settlers in the West Bank. Not those rabid Zionists. No, these are real Israelis that care about democracy, that want equal rights for Palestinians in Israel. Same fucking shit. But because settler colonialism here is not the primary contradiction to rad libs like this, they glorify the illusion of America, the myth of America. Mind you, we just covered last week ISIS kidnapping indigenous people as well and targeting them as well.
Okay? What side you're on? After that,
What side am I on? I'm a socialist.
You what?
I'm a socialist.
What side are you on? Because you look like a fucking fed, because you smell like fucking swine. That's why. You move like somebody who did work for Homeland Security. It looks expensive. Run them fucking pockets, boy. But I have my red star. Don't people know that I'm a communist when convenient? I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist. I've never organized in my life, but I'm a socialist.
You what?
I'm a socialist.
Yeah, no, I work for the Democratic Party. I consult them. And I platform their politicians and make sure I'm not too hard on them. But I'm a socialist. Yeah.
Do I look like an op?
Yes, fool. Because you are.
Yeah, kind of. Oh.
A little bit.
I got the red star on my...
A little bit. I'm not trying to do that.
No, it's all good. Look. See this?
Yeah. That's what I was kind of asking. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, because you're fucking LARPing, bro. Because you're fucking LARPing. That's what they're like, what the bro? Like, you're trying too fucking hard. And the funny thing is, she's probably... I don't want to be mean. I don't want to be mad. You know, I'm just saying by their fit, the Hurley. You know, I see this and I'm not assuming, I always stay at home. I stay home at all times. I've never been outside. I don't go outside. I have allergies. But if I see somebody dressed like this next to me, I'm also not going to be too confident that they're not going to be like a wrecker, right? The Hurley's a little expensive, cabrona, you know, but all right. But to be called out by something like this, that's embarrassing, bro. But I brought my Soviet, my Soviet uh, I bought this at a Soviet, but Bernie Sanders, I voted for Bernie Sanders.
I'm a socialist.
You what?
I'm a socialist.
This is it's so sad. So we got to move on from this. We got to move on from this. I'm indulging now. It's so sad because he's like, I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist. Because he's used to being worshipped. He's not used to being called out like, yo, what the fuck, bro? You look weird, bro. You look weird. I'm a socialist. Fuck if I ever get checked by a white person, bro.
Oh yeah, let me run up.
Look, goes to get reassurance, affirmation, needs it desperately. Like, oh fuck. She could smell the Homeland Security on you, boy.
I look like an op? Yeah, kind of. Oh.
A little bit.
I got the red star on my...
I got the red star. It's all aesthetics for these fucking people.
I'm not trying to do
No, it's all good. Look. See this?
Yeah. That's what I was kind of asking. I wasn't sure.
I feel you. Thank you, though. Thank you. See, we got a fit appreciator.
I mean, shit, bro. You could take the boy from the Homeland Security, but you can't take the Homeland Security from the boy. And just to remind you that it is all aesthetics. That it is all aesthetics. Do I have that? Am I that much of a hater? Do I have it? Let's see. I talk shit all the time, bro. Never be ashamed of being petty. Never be ashamed of being petty. Oh, just in case anyone's wondering why I say that he worked for Homeland Security, I'm not saying it, he said it.
Pause.
So when I was in college, this is more of a confrontation story, but when I was in college, I was working on a program called Cicada with the Department of Homeland Security.
He was working on a project called Cicada for the Department of Homeland Security.
Confrontation story, but when I was in college, I was working on a program called Cicada with the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah. But there's I want the one where he's pretending to what was it? Oh, when he's bragging about his cool stuff. His cool stuff in his background. I don't think I have it. When he's like, of course I'm a socialist. Look at all the things I bought. This is not me talking shit. I don't give a fuck, bro. I'm a real hater, bro.
I voted for Kamala Harris. You got a problem?
Just wanted to hear that. Where is it? Mind you, I gotta be up at 3:30. Reacts. Let's do H3. Or is it? There's the Japan trip. It's the Japan trip. See, this is why I should have been logged into my other account. It'll pull it up quicker. Thank you so much for the super chat, Ace. Pigs just executed a man, Hassan, calling for reinforcements. Almost couldn't believe it when I sent you the tweet. Also good to see you're in one piece. I am. Look, we got a lot of haters on here. Believe it or not, Ace, you're not the only one putting me on to this was shenanigans. Here's the thing. I honestly cannot stand the vocal fry. Believe it or not, I cannot stand the vocal fry. So I don't watch a lot of this stuff. Like, not directly, not on purpose. It's just, it's brutal, man. I'm from Southern California. I'm from LA County. You know, I don't claim LA. But the thing is, these individuals like Hassan Piker, these transplants, will adopt like this weird like vocal fry aesthetic, a way of talking that is like a caricature of what Californians speak like. And I don't trust anybody who is of a non-white ethnic background, despite being white, who doesn't have an accent. I'm suspicious of it. I need to hear a little bit of culture in your fucking voice for me to take you serious. Yeah, I'm not gonna. But he brags about all his gear that he purchased, like the hat. Literally brags about the hat. Oh well. Let's get to reading. Actually, it is gonna bother me because I hate not having the receipts. Give me 1 second, y'all. That is crazy, bro. Oh, what the fuck? A fight broke out at the UFC event. Is that what happened? The fights are on. I told you one of my goals for this year is not to watch UFC events live. Let's see. Nah, I'm not gonna be able to find it. That's a bummer. That's a real bummer. You know, I love having the receipts ready because I never want to be accused of making false accusations, false claims. But we're already taking too long with this. But it's all about aesthetics for individuals like this. It's not about organizing. It's not about getting off your ass. It's about aesthetics. So it's like, I bought the right hat. You should know I'm on your side. No, yeah, there was a fight at the stands, like within the crowd at the UFC event. Apparently, I don't know. I just saw Twitter right now. Where is the one more time? It was during his Japan trip, but there's so much content, so much bullshit. Should I put Japan? Let me try this. Oh, wow, man. That's a bummer. Because it's one of my, like, oh, here it is. So fucking funny, bro.
You can have political disagreements.
Oh, my, bro. The way he talks, bro.
Dude, what do you mean? You can have political disagreements. You can have
political disagreements, bruh. You have political disagreements, bruh. Born and raised in Southern California, y'all. Born and raised throughout LA County. Do you ever hear me talk like that? Oh, this part here, watch. It's all aesthetics.
It's like ill-equipped to have this conversation. You've openly demonstrated that. I consider myself.
No, it's not his real voice. Before he got into character. You can hear the contrast right now. Hear his voice how it was before. Already a grown-ass man. It's not like he hit second puberty, or did he?
Liberal, but in the American political lexicon, I guess like I'm super liberal. That's what that's what Americans think liberalism is. Like the more left you are, the more liberal you are. Even though there is a genuine distinction between the leftist and the liberal, but yeah, I'm progressive. I guess that's the catch-all term.
Why didn't he tell that lady, that individual at the protest, that he was a progressive or that he was a super liberal? That's weird. When he was a Zionist, apparently he's only a super liberal. He's only a progressive.
Like progressive.
Yeah.
Mind you, his audience is so fucking brainwashed that he's telling them, oh, I was honest about being a socialist, while literally saying, I'm a super liberal. I'm a progressive. And all to do what? To impress the Zionists? Literally an IOF veteran whose disgusting merchandise he proudly wore.
Who wouldn't want to be progressive? It's in the name. We're progressing.
Yeah, well, that's why like early stage classical liberals who like wanted to rebrand, like Dave Rubin, for example.
That's not because of the mic, y'all. Don't let him lie to you. It's not because of the mic. It's because he wants to be fucking cool, bro. And we'll move forward, but I just want to get to the part where he cries about the Bernie Sanders stuff. There you go.
Tent nuke chatters. The reason I wanted to shoot when opinion, I even false under.
Hold on. Let me just find it quickly. Oh, here it is. Oh man, it's so fucking. Guys, here it is, guys. Oh my gosh.
Liberal. So what's really interesting about this entire process, despite the fact that I have a literal like Lenin bust behind me, a Che Guevara bust, and a USSR Ushanka behind me, and also
USSR Ushanka, bro. USSR Ushanka. This is what he was bragging about. This is what he took to the protests to cosplay. That's what's like, don't you see the red star? Don't you see the red star? I'm cool. I'm hip. I'm one of you guys.
Despite the fact that I have a literal like Lenin bust behind me, a Che Guevara bust, and a USSR Ushanka behind me, and also prominently display other famous leftist political figures, revolutionary political figures, and also Bernie Sanders, who is himself a socialist, and
literally lies about Bernie and Mamdani being socialists. They're not. They're democratic socialists because they hate socialist projects. They glorify European projects while vilifying and smearing Venezuela, Cuba, you know, the brown and black countries. Bernie and Mamdani can't have that. Can't be associated with them. But again, no concept of what is a socialist and what isn't, because it's all aesthetics. It's all aesthetics. Yeah. All right. Here's the thing. If you don't view liberals as your enemies, if you don't view counterinsurgent propagandists like this as the enemy of the working class, the masses, the colonized proletariat, you're just not on it. You're not. And that's fine. But until you literally listen to what Kwame Ture said, I gotta play nice? Fuck that shit, bro. So yes, bragging about his his little hat. I need to get more like cringy ass fucking gear. This is why I have the weird ass looking Sarape US flag, because I think it's fucking funny that these people are obsessed with aesthetics like this. I laugh at that shit. I need to save this. I didn't look. I'm a hater. I usually won't like this, but I'll like it, so it'll pop up next time a lot quicker. All right, I gotta be petty. I gotta cover that. This is what they won't tell you. By David Dane, hit or miss. I think he's well-intended individual, despite our politics being vastly different. I will say this: we don't have to align politically, but if I think you're a sincere actor, I'll treat you with some level of respect. And to be very clear, I think FD Signifier is a sincere actor who is far too gracious and far too kind and sees good in individuals that are opportunist, parasitic, counterinsurgent, propagandists. I don't know what to tell you. But maybe I have a soft spot for people who, you know, have engaged in like social work and try to help youth. It's something that I admire, something that I want to do, something that I've done on a volunteer basis, but not professionally. And that's still the goal. Maybe I'm guilty of that. That's a grown-ass white man, multimillionaire who worked for Homeland Security. So I don't know what more evidence you want. Yeah, they're cool. They're cool. I'm not getting invited to a brunch where that food's at, because I've kept my record perfectly clean. So I go forward. I go forward to have some fun. All right. Jeffries won whip vote against ICE funding. So I'm not going to write out and say, hey, check out the American Prospect like I would Barr, like a gender report, or Hood Communist. But if you, to keep your pulse on Washington, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's like Dropsite's been doing some weird ass state propaganda. But Ryan Grimm has always been part of that apparatus. Jesus. Would you call Hassan a leftist minstrel? 1, John, better be black if you're joking around like that. 2, nah, it's just opportunism. Just an opportunist. That's all it is. All right. No, Ryan Grimm was literally the reason why the lie that McCarthy was going to become Speaker of the House if the so-called squad pushed for a vote on universal health care during a fucking global pandemic to cover for the Democratic Party not fighting for universal health care. All right. Jeffries won whip vote against ICE funding. While the House Democratic leader announced personal opposition to the funding bill for the Department of Homeland Security, he won't pressure his colleagues to do the same. This is from January 21st. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries announced in a closed-door meeting on Tuesday that he would oppose the bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security for the rest of the fiscal year. But the Democratic caucus is not engaged in a formal whip operation to encourage all members to vote against the bill, which is likely to give a vote on Thursday. If you are the minority leader, or the leader for the Democratic Party, and you're not using your position of power, leadership, whatever the fuck, to oppose ICE while they're murdering American citizens on the street, because apparently kidnapping brown and black individuals and children insufficient to call for abolishing ICE. But even now, this is not enough. Two congressional sources told The Prospect that Jeffries and his leadership team were recommending a no vote, but that is different from a whip operation where Democratic Whip Representative Catherine Clark and her deputies push members to support the leadership position on the bill. Several frontline Democrats in swing seats are expected to vote in favor of the operation. They're terrified of being labeled anti-law enforcement, said a Hill source tracking the legislation. They want this to go away so they can talk about the cost of living more. Problem is, it's not going away. And I mean, look, all the Democratic so-called independent pundits were pushing the Bernie Sanders line of like, oh, we just have to talk about class. We just got to talk about class. That's all people care about. The economy. Sure. In other words, fuck the marginalized people, throw them under the bus. We won't hear their screams and their cries if you just keep pushing forward. The DHS appropriation falls short of imposing true accountability on ICE in the wake of the murder of Renee Good in Minneapolis. It flat funds ICE at current levels for the fiscal year, although in real terms, it's an increase to the budget because the previous year included a one-time anomaly of additional spending. It restricts spending on detention that could theoretically lower capacity to 41,500 beds from a proposed 50,000. And there are some limitations on what DHS can shift from other agencies into ICE. But because the bill includes no penalties or enforcing mechanisms to ensure that its funding directives are actually adhered to, these funding boundaries are not terribly meaningful. The Democratic lawmaker force other guardrails into the bill, like funding for oversight of detention facilities and mandatory body cameras for ICE agents. And additional training is mandated for agents who interact with the public. But other measures, like blocking the detention and deportation of U.S. citizens or barring enforcement personnel from other agencies, weren't added to the bill. And the funding, once again, is not guaranteed, given that the Trump administration has routinely withheld or shifted around funding without pushback from Congress. For this reason, much of the House Democratic caucus, including Jeffries and Clark, can be expected to vote no. But the Democratic leadership worked it so that the DHS appropriation bill will get a separate vote from the other three bills in the package released on Tuesday, while a full four bill package may have needed support from the House Democrats. The DHS appropriation alone, with its meager accountability measures and funding for immigration enforcement, can be expected to get the full support from House Republicans. That makes it a free vote, but a large show of support against it from House Democrats could make it a heavier lift in the Senate, where Democrats would be needed for final passage to avert a filibuster. Maximizing that opposition would typically be done through a formal whip operation, not by announcing proposal opposition or merely recommending a no vote. In the prior to government funding showdowns in 2025, Jeffries did formally whip the caucus into opposition, but that has changed for this operation bill, which is specifically about immigration enforcement. In other words, they really don't give a fuck. They don't fucking care. And they're not even willing to pretend to whip them into shape, into alliance, into following the party line. You think they're gonna fucking save you? It is as ridiculous as saying that the pigs, the local pigs, and the National Guard are gonna arrest ICE agents, federal fucking agents. It's as ridiculous as thinking that the local pigs and the National Guard are gonna defend you from fascism. These are the good fascists. These boots taste so much better. The analogous situation is when Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer pronounced himself a no on the legislation that ended the shutdown in November, while doing nothing to stop several Senate Democrats from providing the votes necessary to pass that legislation. In general, the job of a caucus leader is to unify the caucus rather than take idiosyncratic personal votes. The Hill source told the Prospect that in general, Democratic leadership was disinterested in fighting on the issue of ICE and immigration enforcement. They'll just yell at Trump as he escalates and hope people forget and don't push them for failing to use what little power they had when it mattered. And that's the Sam Cedars, the Kyle KKK Kalinskis, the Crystal Balls, all work the magic here. So we're in the moment, they'll be frustrated and angry at Democrats, but be like, oh well, got to keep voting for them and just keep pushing forward. There is no accountability, none whatsoever. It is true that ICE has a reserve of $75 billion from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, over 7 times its annual budget, and that even if DHS were not funded, ICE agents would still be on the streets and paid in full through drawing from that reserve. Some might argue that this is all the more reason to vote against an inadequate package, but because if the concern is to be seen as shutting down law enforcement, that won't happen in this case. So, literally won't make a fucking difference apparently, and even then, they can't stand their fucking ground. Public polling shows plurality support for abolishing ICE entirely, including substantial support for self-described Democrats. Trump's handling of immigration is sharply negative. Americans are clearly frustrated with the brutality from ICE that they are seeing in the media. Democrats are frustrated too, but not quite enough to do much about it. Jeffries' office did not respond to requests for comment. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. What else we got here? Okay, so the reason why I ended up reading this is because Ken Klippenstein, who, but whatever, Very cool that Congress just renewed ICE budget with absolutely zero concessions. It got a community noted saying Congress has not yet renewed the budget for ICE. The House has passed the budget, but it must now go to the Senate where it'll need multiple Democrats to join the Republicans to pass. AOC, Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez, jump in there, stating, let me see here. They're tormenting ICE. That boot must taste wonderful. Real patriotic American. These wild animals have to leave the British alone and let them do their job. But they're out there every day tormenting the British. Mind you, you know what I mean. For your little bubble, that's how you sound. AOC says this is incorrect. Congress has not yet renewed ICE's budget. House voted, but Senate hasn't yet. They need 10 Democratic votes in the Senate. We can still stop it. Eduardo Martinez says, funny how it got past the House with Democratic votes. AOC, yes, a tiny fraction. Remember 7, but it was 7 out of the 75. Overall, 75 Democrats that praised ICE in 2025. Yes, a tiny fraction. It's horrifying and also surmountable. They need even more Democratic votes and a higher percentage of them in the Senate. I believe we must throw sand in every gear. It was too good. It was too good. It was too good. It was too good. And I believe is it here that Clem, I always say his name wrong. Yeah, it's right here. And this is how he got this article. A tiny fraction that Hakeem Jeffries didn't bother whipping. Exactly. So the pre-made excuse is there. Nothing says I'm not a fascist like calling people animals. No, they're not going to come after Kevin. Kevin is the most American there's ever been. And nothing says American like boot licking. All right. How are we wrapping this up? All right, we're going to wrap up with this because I need to be up at 3:30. Well, I don't need these cans either. What am I doing? Do me a favor, y'all. Hit the like button. Do Kevin a favor. Or America. Hit the like button. Prove that you are a wild animal. And hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell if you want to know when I go live. It's usually Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays in the morning. Again, thank y'all for supporting through the Patreon. $2 gets you access to a Discord. That's where we have the post conversations of the book club that we do every Friday. When I'm not trying to figure out what's going on with my wheels. But other than that, we are reading Open Veins in Latin America. So that's been a lot of fun. Again, all the support to the channel helps. Thanks for the super chats. Thank you for the super stickers and all the support. At the very least, get busy in this chat. Don't be scared, homies. Don't let the Kevins of the world pollute and outnumber y'all in the chat. All right, let's get to it. This is by TooBlack, who I've had the pleasure of meeting. If you haven't already read his book that he co-authored, Laundering Black Rage, I truly recommend it. It is, again, like I love learning how liberals co-opt and compromise and just misdirect the revolutionary potential and energy that we have. So let's get a hold of this. And if you haven't already, check out Black Myth Podcast, where TooBlack and the crew out there just make one of the most entertaining and educational podcasts around. Nonviolence is violence too. Somebody's got to die. Author and poet TooBlack briefly surveys the history and philosophies of nonviolent action to reveal why nonviolent struggle is not actually nonviolent. Now, do me a favor, y'all, if you can, if you have the time, or when you do have the time, go ahead and check out. Give it some traffic, give it some traffic, give it some traffic. All right, let's get to it. And here we have some quotes. There's no such thing as a bloodless revolution by Malcolm X. To sacrifice sons in the war ought to be a cause not of pain, but of pleasure to brave men. And a Gandhi quote. Interesting. Confronting power. History repeatedly teaches us that violence is an inevitable consequence of nonviolent action. No matter how many battered cheeks have been turned the other way, nonviolent movements remain painted in the blood splattered of vigilante kidnappings, vicious beatings, sexual assaults, terroristic bombings, pathological lynchings, political imprisonment, indiscriminate killings, and state-sanctioned assassinations. Research validates this observation. According to Harvard political scientist Erica Chenoweth, of the nonviolent revolutions between 1900 and 2019, regimes responded with lethal repression 88% of the time, making a white supremacist very happy. Nonviolence yields this repressive result because, at its best, nonviolence is a serious confrontation with power. Power, when governed by the capitalist ideologies of imperialist accumulation and colonial domination, is a supremely violent force. Therefore, it will inevitably react violently when threatened, for that is the nature of power. It need not matter the character of how one goes about threatening it. In other words, and I mean, everything's pretty self-explanatory. TooBlack does an amazing job at just writing direct to you. No room for misinterpretation. No matter how you will go about confronting power, it will respond violently because of violence works. That's why the state uses it. If it didn't work, it wouldn't use it. It's that simple. It is a language they speak because it's a language that they find most effective. If one confronts a bear over who controls the honey, the bear will kill to control it. The raging bear does not care if the struggle is armed or nonviolent. It's a simple equation. Once the bear is poked, bloodshed is imminent. In the end, somebody's gotta die for the honey. And you know, I try to emphasize this a lot. We're just fucking animals, y'all. Sure, we got the thumbs. Sure, we have the language and the culture and the yada yada and the clothing and what have you. But we're just animals. And the fact that we've been misled, either through, ideologies, so-called civilization, religion, whatever affected you, to lead you to believe that we should not fight for our safety, well-being, and to secure the resources of our species, to secure the environment on behalf of our species' survival, goes to show that this conscious shit that we earned through evolution or blessed with, whatever you want, can be detrimental if we forget where we come from. Literally the mud. Literally the mud. We are animals. And the moment that we allow ourselves to be manipulated into thinking that we should not be behaving like animals, while the powerful, the rich, the capitalists continue to act savagely with no remorse because all they care about is the honey. But we got to worry about the laws that they set up. We got to worry about the moral questions that they ignore. We got to worry about the heaven that they have no interest in obtaining because they have it here now and today, because they've already assured it for their own future generations on earth, while we look to the pie in the sky. This extends beyond a just metaphor. For example, in Palestine, land is the honey, so Zionists kill Palestinians for it. They kill them when they peacefully confront them on their feet, the Great March of Return, or even more, when they forcibly confront them with arms, the Alaska Flood. Neither a knife nor a hug makes a difference. They want the land. And then the reason why liberals glorify nonviolence is because it means safety and security and well being for the state and its actors. It means that its attack dogs won't be harmed in the process of exterminating, massacring the indigenous or oppressed people rising up. Like decolonization, confrontation with power is a violent phenomenon. Nothing supersedes this basic fact, no matter how peacefully one confronts it. So, what materially separates nonviolence from violence when the confrontation demands that someone will unavoidably die either way? I propose that no material difference exists. Inflicting harm is no more violent than receiving it. Killing is no more violent than being killed. Digging a grave is no more violent than filling one. Ultimately, a body count accumulates, impervious to the method. Violence is still occurring. In one, you're resisting it and engaging directly in violence, and in the other, you're allowing it to occur upon you or upon others who may not be capable of defending themselves, or whose self-defense is futile when there isn't organized collective movements to engage in self-defense. But violence never disappears. It merely attacks select targets depending on the conditions at hand. From there, the only remaining question are who dies and for what strategic purpose. To be clear, this does not mean certain moral and tactical considerations for peace are irrelevant. Yet, it does mean that none exists outside of violence because nonviolence is violence too. One may ask, well, what is violence? For that definitional purpose, we will rely on Chenoweth's straightforward definition. Quote, an action or practice that physically harms or threatens to physically harm other persons. Now, what is nonviolence? Again, we refer to Chenoweth's definition of civil resistance. Quote, a form of collective action that seeks to affect social, political, or economic status quo without using violence or the threat of violence against people to do so. These will be our operating definitions. And again, always the great Kwame Ture. And the infamous grand quote, in order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none. And no settler colonial project does. And I don't believe the ruling class does either, of any state. During a candid 1967 speech, Kwame Ture, civil rights organizer and revolutionary Pan-Africanist, explained the philosophy of nonviolence put forth by Minister Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His main assumption was that if you are nonviolent, if you suffer, your opponent will see your suffering and will be moved to change his heart. Later, he warned that Dr. King made only one fallacious assumption. In order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none. Along with naming the moral bankruptcy of the United States, Ture was questioning the limitations of philosophical nonviolence. On one hand, when applied as a philosophy utilizing one's suffering to redeem the heart of the opponent who causes it, a conscience is required for transformation to occur. And I think even in the situations where one can make the argument that it does work, I've always viewed nonviolence as begging. and I know that may come off as disrespectful, but I've always viewed nonviolent movements as begging for your humanity to be recognized, and that you were willing to die at the hands of your oppressor in order for the hope that they may recognize you as a human being. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre. I know I butchered that. My apology. I know. Yeah. Excuse me. In 1919, Dyer, a British army officer, ordered his troops to fire on peaceful protesters in Jallianwala Bagh, leading to many casualties. Yet I would offer, when applying nonviolence as a tactic, utilizing the brutality of an opponent against him to extract consciousness tied to strategic objectives, a conscience is not required. The primary goal is to exploit their heartlessness to gain support from people who may otherwise be indifferent or afraid. Upon receiving this support, one may galvanize it to momentarily force the opponent to change their behavior out of necessity, not conscience. Yes, and that argument has always been valid if you have allies to rely on. For example, Palestinian people do not have those allies to rely on. They're surrounded by compradors. And over here in the belly of the beast, we're not organized in any significant way to be true allies. And that's 100% on us. We share in that responsibility. And also, when you're talking about a settler colonial project, to expect the settler who benefits from the state oppressing indigenous, black, and brown individuals and communities, that's why you don't see that solidarity. We've never seen true solidarity by the white community at large. Yes, you have your individuals, your John Browns. Yes, you have, your Renee Goods and your Alex Petrie. But too far in between, and never as a large collective community. Nonetheless, philosophical or tactical, what is almost always required from the opponent for nonviolence is violence. Hence, there is no Voting Rights Act without Bloody Sunday. There is no Indian independence without the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. There is no Republic of Ghana without the British crackdown on the Convention People's Party. Without the shock and awe of violence, so-called nonviolence would be unsuccessful, conscious or not. This begs the question that poppers the contradiction. How do we make sense of nonviolence when violence itself is the common denominator? How can we call it nonviolence when violence is the activating ingredient, the yeast that helps bring peace to the top? Political scientist Gene Sharp wrote about how nonviolent practitioners deploy a sort of political jujitsu against their opponents. By absorbing the opponent's brutality through the political martial art, the idea is that they are throwing him off balance politically, causing his repression to rebound against his position and weakening his power. In short, nonviolent practitioners exploit the violence set upon them to tip the scales in their favor. Do fascists care? Do fascist movements care? That's the question, though. And are we, again, limiting ourselves by not viewing even liberals, Democrats, as willing practitioners of fascism? Thus, political jiu-jitsu is an open acceptance of violence. The difference is that the nonviolent practitioner says, if there must be violence, may I be the one to suffer it. Gandhian discipline in nonviolent tactician James Lawson was clear about this. Excuse me. We want the cycle of violence in America and racism stopped, so we will take it on ourselves. We will not dish it out in kind. That is, to me, something that is unnatural. Something that is completely unnatural. Still, a refusal to dish out violence does not exclude one from the cycle. Not when one solicits violence to then suffer it away, as Dr. King daringly wrote following the Montgomery bus boycott. Bomb our homes and threaten our children. Send your hooded perpetrators of violence into our communities and drag us out on the same wayside road, beating us and leaving us half dead, and we will still love you. But we will soon wear you down by our capacity to suffer. I always try to be respectful. But this is just simply beyond me. And again, the whole animal aspect in the animal kingdom, if you were to see this action being taken by an animal being attacked,
I'm afraid of like talking to people who are outside of my race.
you would rightfully assume something was wrong. You would rightfully assume something was wrong. Similar to Lawson, King implies that suffering at the hands of violence is a cleansing act that can end the cycle of violence. King saw suffering at the hands of death as a redemptive Christian ethic to free his white brethren. I remember reading is it Tavis Smiley's book on Dr. King? I didn't like the way that he wrote it, like the approach to the book always threw me off. But I think that book, and I'm sure I'm gonna get heat over this, was like the last time where I'm like, where I would engage with anything that wasn't King's actual words. Because there seems to be I'm not saying TooBlack is doing this, a glorification of his approach that was already difficult enough for me to deal with. Like his philosophy and his positions and his strategies was already hard enough to where I didn't have to read somebody talk about how great they were or about how productive. Like I didn't need the extra salsa. You know what I mean? King saw suffering at the hands of death as a redemptive Christian ethic to free his white brethren from the permanent death of the spirit. And again, that's to me like that's prioritizing your enemy, your oppressor. You're prioritizing them. Suddenly, you're not prioritizing your freedom and your well-being. You're prioritizing their spiritual well-being. This raises an interesting parallel between two seemingly opposing views. Anti-colonial philosopher Frantz Fanon wrote the infamous line in The Wretched of the Earth, "At the level of individuals, violence is a cleansing force." According to Fanon, when colonized people engage in revolutionary violence against a colonizer, they can restore dignity, self-respect, and ultimately defeat the original violence imposed on them by colonialism. Thus, for both sides, violence is cleansing, just by different means. Regardless, violence is served. I like that cleansing style better. Let's both wash ourselves in the blood of the Lamb. Why not? Why am I going to be greedy? Why should I hog all the pain and suffering? Right? Why should I be forced to be hogging all the Christ-like suffering and subjugation? Let's share it, brothers. Let's share it, brothers and sisters, because don't forget, white women have been alongside white men in imposing white supremacy. Let's share the suffering. You get a bloody nose. I get a bloody nose. You get a black eye. Let's share in the suffering. Let's find our humanity together. What is more beautiful than that? What is more familial than that? I mean, come on. In a capitalist society constructed by white colonial rule and imperial sovereignty, we all eat the violence. One stuffs the dish while the other dishes it back out. Dr. King's Christian faith accepts this as much. As Jesus said to the multitudes, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. Although the nonviolent practitioner may not physically throw the sweeping punch or fire the loaded pistol, they welcome a confrontation with a violent force that will surely unleash more upon them and the flock they lead to battle. Thus, courting violence cannot materially be understood as nonviolent. This is great. This is just like flipping a bar on somebody. Okay. However, it can be described as heroically sacrificial. Dr. King saw the parallels. The way of nonviolence means a willingness to suffer and sacrifice. They nobly sacrifice themselves to deadly assault in order to convert it all into a positive force. That's assuming you win. Right? It all, nonviolence literally hangs upon winning. So what happens when you lose? What happens when you fail? Which arguably King thought he did. Or fear that he might have, right? Because at least when you engage violence and you speak its language, you can say, I literally did everything I could. Instead of saying, I took all the punishment that I physically could. And more so, I think that when you engage in nonviolent suffering in this way, you put those who are unwilling to take that suffering, that punishment, at greater risk. Because I don't think you're protecting them or can protect them in any way in comparison to when you do engage directly with violence. Therefore, a more appropriate term for nonviolence is sacrificial violence. We can understand sacrificial violence as an act where one foments the violence of their opponent and then willfully consumes it as a sacrifice for a specific set of objectives. In this sense, sacrificial violence is a form of unconventional warfare meant to even asymmetrical odds. Recognizing their advantages, do not rely on brute force. Their weapons of choice become moral authority, mass disobedience, public sympathy, and their ability to suffer. It's masochist. It's masochist. Indian freedom fighter Mahatma Gandhi was absolutely clear on the sacrifice of war. We are entering upon a life and death struggle, the holy war. We are performing an all-embracing sacrifice in which we wish to offer ourselves as an oblation. During the Salt March, a 24-day direct action where Indians defied British rule by refusing to use British salt or pay taxes, Gandhi was so adamant about sacrifice that he ordered his followers to take the strike of the British without blocking the blows, proving that the more exaggerated the opponent's violence becomes, the more those who make the sacrifice obtain the upper hand. Man, okay. Let me see how much we got left here, because I want to speed run through this last section because I do got to be up at like 3:30. I appreciate y'all sticking around. I truly do. Again, I dropped the link of this article. I encourage y'all to read it on your own. TooBlack is look, I'm not gonna fanboy out, but please read this. And if you haven't already, please hit the like button, hit the notification bell if you want to know when I go live. Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. This is a rare Saturday stream. Again, appreciate the super chats and super stickers and all the support of Patreon. Let's run through this. Let's read through this. And my apologies getting distracted throughout earlier in the stream, but this was supposed to be a 2-hour stream, and we're about to hit 2 hours and 30 minutes. All right. A nonviolent response to violence. The weakness of sacrificial violence is that it only works when there is sufficient violence to immolate. It's a flame that requires constant flirtation with death, which burns out if not properly goaded. Thus, the target for sacrifice must have a strong proclivity for violence. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm thinking now because I remember asking Dr. CBS if essentially liberalism is the highest stage of fascism, and I got shot down. I thought I was being smart. Uh, but does this kind of imply that when you're confronted with something like an Obama or Harris or Biden, that this nonviolence doesn't really work because the liberal is more strategic and more of a smooth operator with oppression than the brute force that the rabid reactionary, the Republican, the fascist participated? If not for the violence of US white Southerners, the civil rights movement would have likely struggled to dismantle Jim Crow. Dr. King said as much in 1967. In the South, in the nonviolent movement, we were aided on the whole by the brutality of the opponent. One of the most notorious campaigns was the Freedom Rides, where black and white activists rode interstate buses throughout the South to challenge illegal segregation. White Southerners reacted to the challenge with harsh beating and attempted murder. And this is where, it becomes a nuanced conversation of once white colonizers essentially neutralize the threat of the indigenous people, and I mean that respectfully, their main focus became subjugating new Africans. And you see the system of internal colonization, right? And the enforcement there. Would nonviolence work for the indigenous people here when confronted with the colonizer? Specifically, settler colonialism, right? Because in the topic of India, it was just colonization. But they weren't trying to settle the land. They weren't trying to replace the indigenous population. And that's why it doesn't work in Palestine. Throughout their voyage down south, freedom riders were often attacked by white Southerners, but the most violent incident was the Anniston bus burning. On Mother's Day, 1961, Anniston, Alabama, a white mob led by the Ku Klux Klan met a group of freedom riders outside their Greyhound buses. Outside their Greyhound bus. They shot the tires, they nearly flipped over the Greyhound, tossed a firebomb inside it, and held the door closed so the freedom riders could not escape. An undercover Alabama state cop flashed his badge and pointed his gun at the Klan to force the door open. Had nobody carried a gun on that imperiled Mother's Day, they would have certainly died. Nonetheless, the sheer violence of the freedom rides, especially since the casualties included white freedom riders. Are they the ones pulling out the conscience of America? I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing now with Renee Good and Alex Petrie. Since the casualties included white freedom riders and the white federal aid to the president made international news, the 35th president was embarrassed because now civil rights, an issue he had given little attention to up to that point, had essentially gone viral. Despite near-death experiences, this was a major victory for the civil rights movement. Hundreds of new people joined the freedom rides, and it internationally exposed the brutality of the U.S. South in the middle of the Cold War. Birmingham Reverend Fred Shuttleworth proclaimed, "This is the greatest thing that has ever happened to Alabama." Wow. Yeah. Wow. Look, I'm a bad atheist, but I do admire that the seemingly delusional strength that faith can give you. I envy it at times. Yet, had the Freedom Riders been arrested without aggression, a victory would not have been won. The Freedom Riders were a 180-degree difference from the Albany movement, which began later that year in Albany, Georgia. The Albany movement was an attempt by Black residents to desegregate the city of Albany, led by the newly formed Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Instead of a police force that actively collaborated with the KKK, like in Anniston, Albany had a savvy, disciplined police chief named Laurie Pritchett. Only a face a mother can love, right? Chief Pritchett studied the tactics of sacrificial violence. Instead of physically assaulting protesters, he ordered his police to handle the protesters with caution while arresting them. He knew one of the goals was to flood the local jail with protesters, so he had them sent to jails throughout the state to avoid overwhelming Albany. Oh, this is a leader in counterinsurgency. Instead of charging them for breaking segregation laws, he charged them with disturbing the peace or unlawful assembly. Ahead of his time. A visionary. This tactic prevented legal challenges. When Dr. King was arrested, a private donor paid his bond so he could not wallow away in jail for free publicity. Fuck. In the end, sorry, I did not know that. Wow. Insidious bastards. No, we love the word bastards over here. Okay. Insidious ghouls, I suppose. In the end, the Albany movement failed to desegregate the city. The newspaper at the time reported that he, Pritchett, defeated the nonviolent direct action with nonviolence. This is an exaggeration since police are violence workers by definition of the job, but Chief Pritchett was successful in neutralizing their tactics. Chief Pritchett proved that sacrificial violence fails if one cannot provoke the opponent, if one cannot provoke the opponent into their worst impulses. You cannot delegitimize an opponent who seems reasonable to the dominant public. Oh, now I'm thinking about Glenn Ford and just Obama being the more efficient evil, and how liberals promoting the Democratic Party just further entrenches us into normalized subjugation and oppression, and it becomes harder to combat it, and that's why we become like neutralized, and the masses go to sleep because the violence is operationally, tactically, strategically less obscene and less upsetting, and the status quo doesn't seem to be flipped upside down. I fucking love that. Wow. You cannot delegitimize an opponent who seems reasonable to the dominant public. And the job of the reactionary, the conservative, the pundit is to make even ICE or any pig seem reasonable. And that's why they argue, well, no, Renee Good, revved on the engine. That's why they push that, to make it seem reasonable. But the liberals don't have to, or try not to put themselves in a situation where they have to make such unreasonable propositions, where their propaganda can be more digestible. Albany taught the movement to target the most racist, violent areas, not only because it helped the people most in need, but also yielded the greatest success. I've been needing to use the bathroom for so long, but we're in the last section. Okay. There's nothing nonviolent about dramatizing evil. In defense of nonviolence, Dr. King once wrote in Ebony magazine, the nonviolent strategy has been to dramatize the evils of our society in such a way that pressure is brought to bear against those evils by the forces of good will in the community, and change is produced. Unfortunately, there's nothing nonviolent about dramatizing evil. That usually means somebody's got to die. It also means that the pressure it creates will take on a violent form. Thus, pressuring the state to uphold your civil rights requires violence to enforce them. And if and when the state fails to enforce them, when it fails to protect its most vulnerable, someone will inevitably fill that void with violence. Organizing for revolution is no different. To defend the revolution, a people will need to exhaust all means against those who seek to undermine it, including nonviolent and violent tactics. Civil disobedience is rarely effective in curtailing a military invasion or a coup d'etat. The simplistic stories where we tell ourselves about nonviolence are, uh, ooh, okay, all right, TooBlack. All right, you nerd. Let's see. A sorry. So Hawk referral. A story or statement, doubtful doubtful authenticity, although widely circulated as being true. No, I need to know how to say this one. Let's see here. We love it over here. Whoa.
Apocryphal.
Apocryphal. A story or statement of doubtful authenticity, although widely circulated as being true. Okay.
Apocryphal.
I like that. The simplistic stories we tell ourselves about nonviolence are apocryphal. Reality fails to verify them. They undermine the sacrifice that comes with struggle. Worse, they fail to grapple with the violence that we face. We owe better to those who sacrifice their lives for us. Nevertheless, we should respect the courageous work of nonviolent practitioners. And I've been saying, all respect, I'm going to provide my criticism and my analysis, but it's still with respect and appreciation and not as admiration for something that I cannot do. We should appreciate the ingenuity in strategy and tactics that morph brute strength into stiff overreach. We should admire how they bravely stare down death to force massive concessions from imperial powers. We should hold holidays in their honor and teach our children about their sacrifices. But we should stop calling it nonviolence. I think that is a very reasonable ask. Materially, nonviolence is a non sequitur. It throws a stone and then hides its hand behind a mythical peace. It invites violence upon confrontation, then demands we call it the opposite. As people bleed, churches burn, and children die. Confrontation with power can manifest in different molds, but its ultimate shape will almost always be violence. TooBlack, bro. TooBlack, y'all. Please go check out the Black Myth Podcast, Black Liberation Media. Please read this yourself. Let it really sink in. Wow. Just fucking fascinating, bro. So great. So great. I appreciate y'all hanging out. I truly do. I know it's late. I gotta knock out like now. So, in the words of Glenn Ford, organize with eyes wide open. And we'll wrap up with The Beast by John Tudell. Hit the like button on your way out. Yes, Ivan. The Beast. In a wisp of smoke, down on the corner, there was this cat named Fortunate Lee, talking at me from voices in his head, yelling about what storyteller said. You gotta be careful here, child. There's a beast in the promised land. There's madness you don't understand. The beast is crazed and running wild. Little boy, man, little girl, woman, no big deal. Nothing personal. Your mind's another meal. Savoring the rush of you like heady wine. Feeding is what the beast is meant to do. Strange are those walls built to hide. Stranger to look and learn not to see. He's in the mask you put on your face. Thoughts, his favorite breeding place. In the race to midnight, it's after 11. The nature of the beast is all he knows. Behind doors of hell are gates of heaven. Doors are open, but the gates are closed. Ya estuvo.